Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
I want to welcome everyone to our January meeting, APAC, our first meeting of the year. I'm John Davey, I'm the chair. With us tonight, John Rezler, vice chair. Tim White, vice chair. Is Brooke here? I didn't see Brooke here. Brooke might come in. Okay. Well, we have some guest speakers tonight, and we have the Central Dorado specific plan, and at the end of the meeting, we'll conduct our officer vote that we were ready to do last month because of the holidays, we didn't have a voting quorum. So, as we get underway, we'll call the meeting to order. Our agenda, unless there's any objection, nothing will come up front. Very good. So, the first thing we do at every meeting is we provide an opportunity for the public to comment on anything they want that's not on our agenda. If it's on our agenda, we want to hear about it from you when we're discussing it. So, to begin the evening, if there's any public comment that somebody wants to admit on something that's not on our agenda, we have a microphone up here. Smile, because we do record the meetings. Oh, Brooke's here now. So, going once, going twice. Well, that was easy. All right, this is easier still. So, less of me and more of someone else is better. Supervisor Heidel here tonight. He's going to provide his communications.
Thank you, John. And obviously, in the later part of the agenda, we're going to talk about things like vineyards. And John Vania, my planning commissioner, District 1 planning commissioner, our planning commissioner, if you look at District 1, will be speaking to that. So I'm not going to cover that because he has far more detail and far more engagement and knowledge of it than I do. So I'm going to defer that. But there's three things I would like everybody to understand. Number one, next Monday, the Board of Supervisors is going to be conducting a strategic plan update. It's a workshop type of format. The public is invited. But on an annual basis, we go through and we look at things like good governance. What are we doing as a board to make sure we meet our obligation, our oath of office, if you will, and legal requirements in doing the proper things, transparency to the public, et cetera, et cetera. So that's on Monday. So we'll be having that review. The public is welcome to attend. I can give you specific times if you're interested. But that's just an ongoing effort to try to make sure we look at least on an annual basis, what can we do to further improve our good governance practices and policies. The second thing I want you to understand is that at the community council meeting on Monday of this week, Bree Mobius, Bree I don't think is here, right? I recognize her, she is, but I don't think she is. Who's our deputy county counsel. She's the person who's been involved with all the development projects for about the last maybe year. John, is that correct? About a year Bree's been in that role?
Yep.
Very extensive legal background. So she's been working directly with our planning commissioner on these recent projects. So if we want to talk about Central El Dorado Hills at some point, Bree is the one that the female planning commissioner listens to and I listen to. She did the Vineyards project. She had a presentation here where she tried to explain to the public what are the obligations of an elected official to have an unbiased and due process, maintain the due process requirements of the oaths of office we swear into. There's a video on that. We put it out on our public media through the county. We put it on our own. I would encourage anyone who really wants to understand what the obligations are, what the process is, to listen to that video. It's very simple to listen to. John helped us with recording of it and stuff, but it's out there. The further part of that is there will be a workshop that the Board of Supervisors will be conducting, and I believe the date is January 25th, where we're going to dedicate a specific amount of time to talk about land use and the requirements to be good stewards of the land use process. So again, the public will have an opportunity to learn and understand what the obligations are, what the roles are of everybody in that whole process, what the decision-making process has to be, etc. Because there's a lot of confusion. People want me to say, this is the way I'm going to vote. That's against my oath of office. I am not going to do that. There are other people that may do that. I am not going to do that. I'm supposed to be unbiased, listen to everybody, and not cast my vote until I understand all of the terms. Because you might understand things like development agreements have a habit of being in a negotiation. They change over time, right? So until all the facts are available, I shouldn't be casting my vote. And there's actually case law that says elected officials who do that can be basically receive punishment of certain kinds, including being removed from office if it's that bad, okay? Those are realities. I can give you the court cases if you'd like to read them, but they're out there. So that's what Bree's message basically was. So like John, he really shouldn't be telling you he's going to vote in favor of a project or not in favor of a project until he has all the information before him, and then he casts his vote as the planning commissioner. So that's what that information is about. There's a lot of misunderstanding. They think that people generally think that anybody who's been a community activist can have that same role as elected officials and board of supervisors, and if you're following the law, you can't. Sorry, but that doesn't work. There are additional responsibilities you take on. I'm a truthful, honest, high integrity person. I'm not going to violate the law knowingly. I may do it because I don't know about the law, but I'm not going to do it knowingly. So that's the thing I want people to try to understand. There's going to be more information on it, but the veil and all the rumors of all this conspiracy stuff need to be cleared because it's false information. I've never accepted and I'm getting too political, I've never accepted a dime from any developer. And I'm never going to accept a dime from any developer or any kind of a gift. And people who don't know my background and my commitment to this community for 41 years of volunteer service, I'm not going to blow that off. And if I'm not elected, that's fine. I'll go on with the rest of my life. But I have put my heart and soul in this community. And to have all these rumor mills floating around of people who don't know me or they intentionally want to destroy me for some reason, and I see Steve Ferry sitting here. He ran for elected office called supervisor.
Sure did.
So he knows a little bit what that's like when people steal your signs.
I was lucky.
They destroy your signs. It's an ugly business, unfortunately.
They burned mine.
But I'm not a politician. I don't want to be a politician. I want to serve the people. And if my term of service is over, I will accept that and gracefully bow out and go on and do something else. But I'd love to be your representative for 4 more years. And I'm getting too political again, but I'm done. So I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to use our legal power. I'm going to use county council. And I will pursue the people who are doing this because I think it's an extreme violation of what their oath of office may have been when they served previously in some kind of elected position. So that will come in due time. So keep your eyes and ears open because this isn't over. So thank you very much. And if there are any questions in general, I got off on a tangent. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. But the emotions are starting to come out. When your personal commitment to this community is attacked by people who have no idea, that hurts. It really hurts. So, questions on some other subject? So I can change gears. Anything in general?
Do you have something else after this?
No.
Well then, let's take advantage. The vineyard project is not on our agenda.
Okay.
So
So maybe it's time for John to come up.
I would love for John to come up.
Okay.
And talk about it. But to refresh everybody's memory, APAC looked at the vineyard project. We submitted comments on the draft EIR, the final EIR. We were very time conscious. The project came back. We had about 2 weeks to look at a 200-page document. We submitted some comments. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of other public comments submitted to the Planning Commission at the time. So the project was approved at the Planning Commission on the Board of Supervisors, and now it's a bit hoo-ha. So, John, I'd love you to elaborate.
Thank you.
Good to see you all here. I wanted to say something personally about John. I mean, John's a friend of mine, but anyone who's been in meetings with us, when we've had disagreements and stuff, will attest to the fact that I am no yes man. And so I give him my straight opinions and stuff, and he takes them. But one thing he doesn't do, and one thing I don't do to him, I don't tell him how I'm going to vote. He doesn't try to force me into anything I should consider and so forth. So that's why he put me in this position to be, an independent voice. And so I do that. I appreciate that, John. And so I just wanted you guys to know that I've never asked him how he's going to vote on something. He doesn't ask me. That's an understanding that we have. But we share information. We talk issues and so forth, and talk to the APAC guys. And always willing to talk to you folks as well. So I've been talking to Commissioner Williams. He might even pop in at some point. There's been a lot of interesting stuff on social media. I've probably been paying too much attention to it and stuff, but it's interesting. But I wanted to, like I did at the community council meeting, I wanted to just make myself available I didn't want to get bogged down in any major details and so forth, but I wanted to make myself available for any questions you might have, concerning the project. I'll say this, that reasonable people can disagree, the issue about, the number of parcels and so forth. Reasonable people can disagree without, being personal and laying attacks towards each other and so forth and so on. So we gotta, to me, we gotta remember that. And, issues of traffic and so forth, we dealt with some last minute traffic issues concerning that. One thing I've heard about the whole walkway situation, in respect to some gift or some favor and so forth, that's always been a condition of approval for that left turn pocket. It was a requirement, it was a level of service issue. I forget, it was the AM or the PM peak hour turn movement, but that required, there's lots of talk about, hey, you're not having to mitigate the traffic and so forth. That was a mitigation for the traffic, was the left, to put in the left turn pocket. At the very last minute, we were having issues where, the cutoff road that services currently, for most of you may know this, it currently serves the Overlook project, the old Wilson Estates and so forth. Because of, from what I hear, actually the Overlook tripped it into that, and then it added to it this project with the changes and so forth. DOT imposed a no left out from Malcolm-Dixon cutoff to Green Valley Road. Well, the result of that is that those turning movements that want to go eastbound and go up to Cameron Park have to travel on Malcolm-Dixon roadway if you obey the law and do not turn left out onto Green Valley Road. What happened was, we found out through much discussion, there was a secondary access on Malcolm-Dixon Road to serve this project. And there was some handshake agreement with the engineer that, hey, let's restrict the right out for you to go westbound and go down towards Salmon Falls Road on Malcolm-Dixon. And so the traffic model, and so you would do like a little preclusion, but people could still turn right on Malcolm-Dixon Road if they wanted to. But the way the model treated it, it forced all of the cars onto the Malcolm-Dixon cutoff. Well, we want most of the cars to take Malcolm-Dixon cutoff. That was the whole point of it. I worked with Cooper Thorne, when I worked for the county for DOT, I worked for transportation for 29 years. And I worked that out with Brian Allen at Cooper Thorne and Associates for that connection to come out and to tee off at the S curve, the sharp S curve at Malcolm-Dixon, to slow down the cars and get the cars off of Malcolm-Dixon, because at the time, this was back in the early 90s, to get the vehicles off of Malcolm-Dixon. So that was the whole point. But with the way the traffic model pushed all the cars out there, it kicked that left turn into a level of service F. And so we asked the engineer to, hey, why don't you do something more reasonable, with the assumption that, hey, a few cars could turn right if they wanted to. And as a result, then we were able to lift that no left out. So again, the whole point was to, and we were successful in doing that, get more trips off of Malcolm-Dixon, get them out to Green Valley Road. So, but as a result of that, it kicked the threshold at Lock Way just under LOSF. And so technically, it didn't meet LOSF, and thus they were not required to put in that left turn pocket. But with all of the discussions and all of the that went on, the developer realized, hey, I still need to fulfill this commitment, and so forth. So they decided to go ahead and honor that and still put that left turn pocket in. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts that we went through, and I worked, Rafael Martinez, DOT director, was very helpful in trying to find some solutions again to lift that no left out on the Green Valley Road, because again, we didn't want to put more trips on Malcolm-Dixon Road. We wanted to get them out to Green Valley Road. So that's some of the nuts and the bolts, and I hope I'm not confusing you guys in respect to what went on. But in respect to some of the comments about the density bonus aspect, again, reasonable people can disagree, but it's in the general plan, okay? And could probably speak more to the details of that. I'm not going to put you on the spot. But it is in the general plan, it's in the zoning ordinance, it is a provision that's allowed, and we had a 3-0 vote on that. Commissioner Williams voted for District 4 to approve that. Our general assessment was that with the additional open space that would result in minimizing the impact of cutting trees, the impacts to the wetlands and grading and so forth, We thought the overall impact was going to be less in respect to those aspects of that. However, again, reasonable people can disagree in respect to, hey, having 5-acre lots versus 1-acre lots, that's fine. But again, no one other than the CSD and APAC provided comments when we went through the whole process. I know Tara McCann had provided a lengthy document, I think it was in the summertime or in the spring.
It
was a draft.
No, the draft EIR.
Oh, the draft EIR. But we never had anyone, unfortunately, because we want folks to come and provide feedback to it, because we want a sense from the community of what's going on. It helps better educate us so we understand the issues better. So I wanted to just give just a real brief overview of some of the challenges and some of the things we were doing, and I think we solved some more of the traffic issues as a result of that. But I wanted to address some of these issues because of some of the stuff I've been reading on social media and so forth. So I wanted to lay out some facts and stuff. And I wanted to open up myself for any questions or comments that you might have. And I'll try to address them as best I can. So anyone got any comments or questions? Love to hear from you.
John, can you
Come on up.
Oh, yeah.
So they can record it.
Oh, it's this one, Steve. Sorry, that's the camera.
Oh.
But you look in there real close.
Another shot at
Yeah, beautiful.
My question, and I sent a letter in when the draft EIR was going on with the vineyard, and I just actually going to say this so that the public can hear what was said in the letter.
Please.
I'm involved with the cityhood movement, as some of you know, and this area will eventually be part of the city of El Dorado Hills when we are successful. In that regard, at the time that the approval was being requested, they were requesting that they could put in septic tanks, one per house per acre on 1-acre properties. And I thought that was just absolutely outrageous. Because I'm a city guy, okay? I came out of San Jose in Southern California. I'm not a rancher from up the hill. But we have spent millions of dollars to build the septic system and the water system that's here in El Dorado County through the EID. And it would seem to me without any question that that project should have to hook up to the EID provided thing.
For sewer.
Sure, absolutely. In any case, that's my statement. It's not really a question.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. We weighed that issue, and the developer, I think, was open to doing septic or sewer. I know Youngdahl, in fact, I've got a 1/4-acre lot, and I have a septic system. I'm in Lake Hills. And,
That's the problem.
oh, is that the problem? Well, he lives there too. But I, in fact, I hired Youngdahl because they're very conservative. Dave Cedarquist in particular, very conservative, and because I wanted the best and so forth. And so I know they did the individual septic designs, Youngdahl and Associates and so forth. And so, like I said, there's other geotechnical engineers, you know, but Dave Cedarquist in particular is very conservative and so forth. I trust his work. But again, the developer was open to doing sewer as well. You know, and that's something they could potentially revisit and so forth. So, but thank you for your comment. Anybody else? Mr. Ray.
Hi, John. Wayne Lowry. Came in late, so I missed your comments, but I know in the past we've had concerns about this area not being annexed to the CSD, and there are going to be new people getting there, wanting services, and you know, our towns are going to come. And we go to Folsom to do a lot of our shopping, although fortunately that's staying more and more in El Dorado Hills. But I can see where the people that will be impacting our parks and our recreation services. And I'm curious where the county planning commission might be going with the annexation issue.
Well, because it's not even in the sphere of influence as far as I understand, we thought that was a bridge too far to require them to go through that whole sphere of influence and then annexation into the CSD.
LAFCO is updating their MSR for the CSD, right? Soon. Is this project going to get out ahead of that, or do you think it?
Well, it's gonna be heard by the board next week.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's already been approved by us.
The project.
Already,
Oh,
yeah.
I see. Okay, so it's already. That's the part I missed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
February.
Yeah, the applicant is requesting a continuance because they want to, you know, meet with the neighbors, do some more outreach and so forth. But But again, because you would have to go to LAFCO for, because it's not even in the sphere of influence, we thought, well, that was a bridge too far at this point. And again, you're getting out into the rural territories and so forth.
Yeah, but the density on this is pretty high, isn't it?
Well, it's 1 acre parcels through the
Okay.
density bonus, but it's typically 5 acre residential is the zoning.
This is not the newer project that's been proposed.
No, are you thinking?
Yeah, it's the 42. It was 19, it came back to the
Yeah, 42, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
but that was a density bonus allowed through under the general plan, which created more open space and so forth. But it did allow them to about double their lots.
Not to prolong discussion, but is there a chance the developer would be open to annexing?
Well, they're going to be, you guys, they can, CSD can come to the board meeting and express their concerns and so forth, at the board meeting.
Yeah, and I don't know the CSD's position, this is just me.
Yeah, they had requested that they be
Okay.
annexed
Okay.
into
Thank you.
the CSD, so.
Thank you. Thank you for being our planning commission.
Oh, appreciate it. Anybody else?
John, could you comment again at the community council meeting? Because I see some new faces that don't go to are not regular attendees of these meetings, about the importance of getting individual and community input at the planning department stage and the planning commissioner stage, because that's when really the community input can be more effective, because by the time if it gets to the board of supervisors, by then everyone is sort of in concrete. The planning commission has made recommendations, the planning department has done all the research.
Yeah.
If we as community, individuals in the community or as groups are going to have more influence on decisions, we need to get involved earlier. And you said it very elegantly Monday night, so if you could repeat that or paraphrase it.
Yeah, like I said earlier, we desire your input. It helps us. When I worked for the county, people would call in and say, hey, I got this problem, and I would refer to them. Look, you're the experts. You live out there. You deal with the traffic every day, and so forth. And you folks that live out in your communities, we do want to hear from you. We may have differing opinions and so forth, but boy, the more input we get from you folks, the better these projects are going to be. And we're right in the middle of central El Dorado Hills, okay, and I'm sure you guys have been reading your papers and so forth. So, and yeah, we've got our special meeting that the board asked us to do. So we're encouraging you guys to come out and to voice
Would you
your.
announce when that is, John? I didn't mention that, but if you could announce it, please.
Yeah, it's going to be at Steve's church, at District Church.
What can I say?
Yeah. Well, not only yours, but my granddaughters and my daughter and son-in-law, they go there as well. And it's
Mention that it's right next to Caliber Collision, because they actually have big advertising.
well, what everyone normally references, it's above the movie theater.
There you go.
Yeah. So, you had design control over that, the church did, so Caliber, I do remember that. But yeah, it's going to be 6 o'clock, and hopefully not till 10 o'clock, but we have it 6 to 10. And I also want to apologize. I didn't set that specific date. Yes, I know it's a national championship to you college football fans, but turn on your recorder and please join us next Monday night. So, but yes, I'm not afraid of opinions and so forth. I'd like them as, there's nothing wrong with emotions and so forth, but boy, we want some facts, we want some figures. There's a lot of smart folks out there. If you read through the draft, the draft EIR and so forth, there's a lot of smart folks, a lot of technical folks that live in this community, and we appreciate that. And we read the emails. I mean, we're getting a plethora on Central El Dorado Hills, but we value that greatly, and we don't shy away from that at all. And again, as Bree mentioned on Monday night, the board is saddled with all of the county's business, for all the departments and stuff. And so it really helps them that we can we have the time and we can borrow into some of these more specific details and provide that information to them in the form of our hearing and also some of the discussions. I give John a download on some of the things we came across, and he's pretty diligent to actually listen in and so forth. So we want to try to do a lion's share of that detail work for them. But again, they're their own folks, they're their own persons, and they've got to look at it independently as well. So I hope I addressed that, Tim. And so, So any other questions on that or anything else that's going on in the Planning Commission? Central El Dorado Hills, if you have any questions on that or whatever. Yeah.
So I'm kind of new here. My name's Sean Dillon.
Hi, Sean.
And, so I'm looking at the Central Dorado Hills and then the Vineyards projects.
Yeah.
Why isn't anybody doing traffic studies on the four-way stop at Francisco and Dorado Hills Boulevard? That seems to be bypassed. And that's a four-way stop in the middle of all these other areas that have stoplights.
It was evaluated in the traffic impact analysis.
Not for Vineyards, because I just looked at it today.
Yeah,
There's all that traffic coming down that street
yeah, before, how long have you been here? How long have you been in the area?
since 2008.
Okay, so you know about the free right that they put in. That helped alleviate some of the traffic.
Well, there's a realignment that's supposed to happen that extends El Dorado Hills Boulevard.
Well, it's going to
behind the
realign to Francisco, and
But I mean, do we just not worry about that? I mean, that's a.
well, I don't think that it exceeded the level of service capacity.
I live right there.
Well, I live down the street in Lake Hills.
Well, I live like.
Can I comment on
100
this?
feet.
I don't like to do this, but I'd like to comment on
Yes.
this. That project you're talking about was taken out of the board, taken out of the CIP, the capital improvement project, as a result of the 2016 board decision. When I got on the board, they took out a number of projects that were scheduled for improvements in El Dorado Hills. Green Valley Road, Bass Lake Road. The then board of supervisors took it out of the planned improvements. Joe Hart and I are fighting to get it back in. I met with the DOT directors. These have to be back in the CIP. They need to be done.
Well, then why can't that be a condition of these projects getting approved?
You'd have to talk to county council about whether you can condition a project at that level. I suspect the answer is you can't condition one project that way because there's a multitude of benefits.
Well, to me, they need to improve that section of road if they're.
It was defined that way, but it was taken out. And I'm
Well,
fighting to get it back in.
there's two aspects of that. There's a widening to 4 lanes, which is Supervisor Heidel is talking about.
Right.
But you specified the intersection. The long-term plan is, Brittany over, that's not connected.
I know the realignment. Yeah.
And so I think for me, there's transportation dollars, and I'm not a huge fan of traffic circles, roundabouts, and so forth. But with all of those intersections that got to connect, and with the park area that we have over there, and I've talked to DOT about this before, that would be a great location to put in a roundabout, and that would probably allow them to defer the 4 lanes, because then it's not going to back up as much, and you're not going to need the expensive 4 lanes. You could probably defer that and put your dollars into some other improvements. But it's a 2-phase thing. You've got the 4 lanes, and then you've got the intersection that you've got to deal with. And so, but yeah, they took the 4 lanes out of there. But I would argue and they're going to be looking at that in the next year. But I'm going to ask them, hey, look at a roundabout doing that, and they can get a lot of grant monies towards that roundabout and actually save themselves some money and not have to necessarily do the 4 lanes all the way up to Governors, where it narrows down. So,
Thanks.
thank you.
Are there any other questions for John?
All right.
That's good. Thank you.
Hey, thank you guys for your time. And we'll see you Monday, right? Who's going?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
All right,
baby.
good turnout. Great.
I don't think Kevin's going to be there, though. I think he's got another engagement, right?
You afraid?
So, we have guest speakers tonight from the County of El Dorado, Anna Botany, and who else is here tonight? Liz, Aaron, and Marty. Is there Aaron? There you are, Marty. Didn't say hi. I apologize. We're here to talk tonight about the county-initiated commercial multifamily residential design standards for community regions. They'll get into the details on this, but it's an opportunity for El Dorado Hills residents to be participants in defining some of the design standards, just beginning right now with multifamily and commercial. It's just an opportunity we haven't had available to us in the past, and we have actually some APAC members have volunteered to participate. So with that, I'm just going to have you guys come up, and however you need to present, I'm just going to leave your names on the board.
Well, thanks, John, and thank you for having me here this evening. So I'm Anna Botany, and I'm a planning manager with El Dorado County, and I oversee the long-range land use planning and housing projects and programs. And I actually came to APAC back in November of 2018, kind of before we even kicked this project off. And at that time, we were working on developing a scope of work to hire a consultant to help us with this effort. And then it took us a few months to actually get that consultant contract through the approval process, and that contract was executed around June of 2019 with the De Novo Planning Group, which is actually a local firm right here in El Dorado Hills. So we're very pleased to have some local presence here. And Marty Eckert of the De Novo Planning Group is here. He's our main point of contact, but there are other members of the team that he will be talking about as when we get to his point of the presentation. So going back to in June of 2019 is when we kind of officially kicked off this project, and it was per the direction of the County Board of Supervisors. And the direction was to create community design standards and guidelines for new commercial and multifamily residential development in what are the 4 community regions that are identified in our general plan policy 2.1.1.1, and that's El Dorado Hills, the unincorporated areas. So El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park, Shingle Springs, and Diamond Springs / El Dorado. And so this project actually will implement General Plan Policy 2412, which directs that the county shall develop community design guidelines in concert with members of each community, which will detail specific qualities and features unique to the community as planning staff and funds are available. And each of these plans shall contain design guidelines to be used in project site review of all discretionary project permits. So again, I mentioned we've hired a consultant. The project is estimated to cost approximately $250,000. At the time when we got approval from the board to initiate this, general funds were earmarked for this, but the county recently submitted an application for SB2 grant funding and was awarded. About half of the funding will be allocated to offset the general fund allocation. The scope of work of this project is actually broken into 2 components. Component 1 is focusing on creating custom design standards for the Shingle Springs community region, and then component 2 will use the Shingle Springs design standards and the process that they go through as a prototype to develop design standards and guidelines for the other 3 community regions. Ultimately, this will all culminate into a final kind of design standards manual, or maybe 4 different manuals that will be presented to the Board of Supervisors for adoption. And the adopted design standards will streamline the process for future new commercial and multifamily residential development, those that meet the design's requirements and standards. So the timeline is that the Shingle Springs design standards are anticipated to be completed by spring of 2022, and the other design standards to be completed by summer of 2022. So I'm here. I also have Aaron Mann, who is senior planner, and he's on my team. And so we're the main, he's going to be kind of the main point of contact. I'm the contract administrator and the project manager, but we're all going to be attending a lot of the outreach meetings. And so there has been, John mentioned earlier, so after we kicked off the meeting last year, we did a lot of outreach to all the communities. We even used social media, asking for volunteers to serve on what we're calling a community advisory team for each of the regions, and we were very pleased. I believe we have about 15 members of the community that have signed up to participate for the El Dorado Hills, and you mentioned a few APAC members, so I know Brooke
Washburn.
Okay, you're nice to meet you, and
Joe Wiley back here.
yes. Okay,
And
and I
then
think
we-
there's Mike Lilienthal.
Mike Lilienthal, fire department.
Okay, fine, okay. So anyway, I thought I'll turn over to Marty and kind of let him give you a little more details on it, kind of where we're at, but we're really kicking off all of the kind of community meetings this month. So I'm going to turn over to Marty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Good evening, everyone. So Ann provided a really good introduction. I'll fill in a few more of the details. So again, this project is focusing on commercial and multifamily design standards. I know Ann literally read verbatim general plan policies, and in that policy it refers to design guidelines. The county's decided to take the approach of standards in lieu of focusing on guidelines, first of all, to articulate the community's expectations with greater teeth, also to provide just a greater understanding to applicants so that there's more certainty with the development process, and also, especially in the case of multifamily residential development, to fulfill state law that's come into effect since the project kicked off. And that delves into objective design standards. So in the case of this project, it's really based around community-based planning. As Ann mentioned, we're working alongside the Community Advisory Team, or the CAT. It's nice to see some of you here this evening. The first meeting for El Dorado Hills will be January 29th. And we're actually kicking off the first CAT meeting tomorrow night in Shingle Springs. That coincides with the first phase of the project, which is analyzing existing conditions and going through the first phase of public outreach. So I've been reaching out to stakeholders. I'm still in the process of that. Also, in addition to the CAT meetings, we'll be holding workshops in each of the communities. So that will be later in February here in El Dorado Hills. Following this first phase, we'll then get into preparing the guidelines, and that's really where the CAT's work begins in earnest. We'll meet an additional 3 times and review draft content with the CAT before finalizing the public review draft, having a second phase of outreach, and then moving forward towards adoption. I guess the final thing I would say before I open it up to any questions, the focus here really is on community-based design standards. So it's the idea that whatever we bring forward in these documents are calibrated to the existing community conditions and also the community's preferences for future development. With that, if you have any questions.
Who adopts? Who has to final adoption of this?
Sure, that's going to be the Board of Supervisors. So the majority of the work is done on the community level, again focusing on the CATs, stakeholder interviews, and then the public workshops that I referred to. But ultimately, it will go forward to the Planning Commission for a recommendation and then adoption by the Board of Supervisors.
What is the scope of the guidelines? I mean, what are you addressing specifically?
Thank you, that's a good question. So comprehensive, really, they're comprehensive design standards for all aspects of commercial and multifamily residential design. So that's focusing on the site and building design primarily. We're also detailing architectural themes. The sub-consultant on the project, Page & Turnbull, is an architecture firm that focuses on historic preservation. So the idea being that they can analyze the existing architecture here in El Dorado Hills and throughout the community to understand what architectural styles or themes might be desirable. And then finally, we will have development prototypes, which are essentially conceptual site designs that provide an avenue to test the design standards and the architectural themes on conceptual sites.
So, I'm jumping in front of Steve, sorry. So one of the primary focuses is to streamline the development process so that as long as an applicant is consistent with design standards and guidelines, that their application can be processed in, I don't want to say more speed fashion, but in a more streamlined fashion, knowing that they've met these conditions, and it sort of eliminates some of the community concerns. Is that pretty accurate?
Correct. So the idea is to, as accurately as possible and as in detailed fashion as possible, really capture the community's preferences for design. With the idea that in the case of commercial projects, if they fulfill all of the applicable design standards, potentially they could go through a ministerial process, which is staff level. It's much quicker than going through a full-blown discretionary design review process. In the case of multifamily residential designs, as I mentioned before, objective design standards now apply. That simply means that there's no room for subjective a subjective determination on the standard, and there's some quantifiable element that is known to all parties involved before the application of the standard. And that could operate either in ministerial fashion, like I described, or through a design review process, but it's really the checking of boxes. So it's really in the community's interest to be as detailed and precise as possible in the standards that come forward to hopefully encourage the kind of development that's desired here in the community.
Well, to someone else? Go ahead.
Excuse me. Town Center was developed 10 years ago or more, and it could have been a commercial multifamily project if somebody had thought it through and been able to put some apartments on top of those buildings and built it to 3 stories. It's kind of a shame that they didn't, because there are projects like that throughout. Is this the kind of thing that you're looking at so that they come up, not necessarily in Dorado Hills, but maybe on Mosquito Road or something, where you're going to build a community like that? Is that the kind of thing you're looking at so we can get a picture of it in our brains?
So, that's a good question. This is focusing strictly on commercial and multifamily residential development. So no mixed use, either vertical like you're describing with residents above commercial, or horizontal where you would have some commercial component likely closer to the street and then probably multifamily behind it. However, because it is commercial and multifamily, it's important to think about the interface of 2 properties, one with commercial and the other with multifamily residential, so that it's designed in a manner where there's good access and just the aesthetics of the properties work together properly.
So is this included with the mud design in the general plan? Is that what you're looking at?
I'll profess I'm not familiar.
So in December of 2015, the board actually adopted a mixed-use design manual.
Right.
And so that has been out there available to developers, and to be honest, we haven't had a single mixed-use project come in, but I believe I've heard recently that there is a project on the table. So, I mean, that's already been done, and that's kind of, if you have seen the mixed-use design manual, that's similar to what we'll be developing through this effort. Only again, it's focusing on commercial and multifamily, but not separate, not mixed use that you're talking about.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm still learning some of the acronyms.
How does this affect the planning in the business park or in Town Center West or Town Center East? Is this part of it? Can you have design standards for those areas?
My understanding, those are all under the specific plan, so they're under their own.
They're existing.
Yeah.
So you can't, your planning would not include the business park or the town center?
Not the town center, it's all part of the Dorado Hills
Specific plan, and they have a plan development for building.
And the business park also would not be part of that?
No, I'm not sure about that, but I don't know if Woods should be in this specific plan.
No, they have their sound R&D and so. It's a good question.
Yeah.
So I can speak to
Yeah.
this actually.
Okay.
So the only properties in the immediate vicinity would be the Walgreens and then the vacant site adjacent. So kind of kitty corner from the town center.
The Walgreens, and then you have the image, you have that the medical center and the land in between. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, it's CVS.
Sorry, CVS. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I knew exactly
Okay.
Yes, CVS, yeah. So CVS and then the vacant, I'm so sorry, the vacant parcel just beyond that.
Okay.
These are, you said they're standards, so they're not restricted. In other words, if someone wants to build a commercial 2 or 3 acre site and they decide they just love Tudor architecture, which would stand out like a sore thumb here in El Dorado Hills, they can still apply to do it because they can go around the standards if they so choose. Is that correct?
They could apply, so there are potentially 2 avenues which we haven't completely sussed out. The first would be some exception from the standards, which may be granted within the design review process. Otherwise, it would be going through the variance process.
Will these standards apply to the proposed Costco site of the commercial area that's designated Silver Valley Road? Are these also, those standards will apply there?
I believe that's at the interchange, correct? Yeah, yes, that is a commercial designated site.
But if you're not going to have these standards adopted to 2022, if say a Costco came in earlier and presented and went through the process,
Correct.
planning board,
Correct.
they would be grandfathered before the effective date that you might have these standards established.
Indeed, so if the application is submitted prior to the adoption of this document, then they would not be applicable.
Oops, you got one more.
There's a new law that's in process right now called SB 50 that is supposedly going to take the planning for low-income and very low-income housing out of the hands of the county and deliver it to the state of California probably within the next 2 years. Will that have anything to do with your multifamily is the only way you can get low-income housing. So will that have anything to do with your standards if that does pass and becomes law? Or will you not even have a voice in it?
So this is really focused on the design of projects. It's not focused on the entitlement processing of projects aside from design. So I would say that that's an independent consideration. The law that I referenced, SB 330, went into law either late October or early November. And that's really what's... There were previous provisions for objective design standards, but it has made it carte blanche law for the next 5 years. That's really the only law at this point, new law that's affecting the process.
You've answered every question. Is there anything else that you need tonight?
You know, the only other thing I would add, and this was something that we asked the community council, are there any projects, community-based design projects, that any of you or anyone in the audience has been involved in here in El Dorado Hills that we should be aware of as we move forward? As I mentioned, we're going through the existing conditions analysis, so any input you wish to share will be very helpful.
Off the top of my head, the only ones I'm going to have are like the town center apartments, but that's in that specific plan, and it is in a PD overlay. They're doing DRC for both sides, east and west. So,
You have Town Center West,
which is,
which would be
Well,
55 and over. Independent. There would be housing, not apartments. They would be actually the residents, one story, 2-story, a hotel with that.
yeah.
But that seems to be outside your scope because it's in Town Center West.
I think the only one that we've had in front of APAC in the last 3 years, and Steve, you were involved with this a little bit, and Wayne, you were as well, was with the church on Dorado Hills Boulevard. That church, as being built, is sort of a very modernistic, and a lot of people said it's on Dorado Hills Boulevard. It didn't meet their idea of a church by design. They were looking for more traditional houses of worship, and so that's the only one that's really come up in front of APAC in the last 3 years, where I think we were really talking about design, the appropriate type of design for a church.
So the Chick-fil-A project, it's focused in on the design standards, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of people were opposed to it, was that it didn't meet the design standard. There was one with regard to how driveways are situated and drive-throughs.
And earlier in that project, the first phase, it was when and that was the what's the name there?
CVS, Walgreens.
That was the conflict back in that 2008-2009 period, was that they were proposing a Santa Barbara theme architecture, and there was a lot of opposition to that, so they tailored it to not be that. But that was, in recent memory, that's probably the one that was changed that I can remember.
You have Montano. There's supposed to be a hotel there. There's supposed to be some kind of a music center, but that's been quiet. And then you have
It's
on
It's kind of the
quantum daycare, quantum assisted living, White Rock and Carson's.
Which are
Of course,
probably
we built right on the corner, but it's been very quiet. We don't know what's happening with that.
It was a conditional use permit, wasn't it?
They were working towards a permit, and I don't know what happened.
I thought it was approved. I thought it was approved, but I haven't heard anything. Because remember, they had to get they had an appeal from the JPA.
I don't know what, no, they got the appeal from the JPA.
Yeah.
They gave them some land
And
or
they said
whatever. But that still may be on the books, or they may have decided not to go ahead with it because Oakmont has opened up and they're within, about a mile of each other.
So it's certainly useful to look at all of these projects, even if they're not strictly multifamily or commercial. They still reveal something about design preferences in the community, and certainly looking at town center documentation is important too. So thank you.
Some closing remarks. So one of the things that Aaron's been working on, and we're going to be releasing it soon, is a dedicated web page to this project, and it'll be on the county's main web page under long-range planning. And so we're working on, we wanted to finalize all the dates that are coming up for the meetings for January and February. And so we're hoping to get that rolled out by Friday or Monday at the latest. So it'll be a place where people can go and get updated information. We're going to have on the landing page, there's going to be a what's new dedicated section. There's also a feature for subscribing to email blasts. So if you want to be notified when we have meetings coming up or when something new's been posted, there'll be a way you can subscribe to that. So this is a way for people that can't actually participate on the CAT and still be involved. And as you mentioned, that we're going to have public meetings and workshops where it'll be open to anyone that would like to attend. So we're hoping that that'll be a good feature. And so it's been kind of tricky because we're dealing with the 4 different communities. We want to make sure that we have everything out there. So we're using a kind of an accordion system. So there'll be a separate, it'll be one page, but if you want to find out about the Dorado Hills projects, there'll be kind of a separate dedicated sub place that people go to for that. I don't know if you want to add anything more about it or just that it's, yeah, so we're getting ready to launch that.
Where's the location of the January 29th meeting?
That's the one from here. So I wanted to talk to Kevin a little bit later because we're looking at the fire station 85 right down here, but we're still not sure. There's another meeting that's in that room until like 5 o'clock, and our plan was to have this meeting from 6 to 9, or no, from 6 to 8. We were hoping to have it here, and I'll have to talk to Kevin about this because we want to see if we can get the meeting facility waived. Do you have any other good locations?
Well, not to speak for Kevin, Oakville Park in Bass Lake, I think they'll take 50 people.
What is it called?
Oakville Park.
Oh, yes.
There's a few associated weddings, so we'll let them know. And also, the fire station the fire station on Bass Lake Road, Station 86, I think it's very small.
We thought that one is only 20 people. It's
Yeah,
too small. So the one here, I think, is it's pretty big.
Okay.
So I think that we're going to have it all narrowed down by this week, and we'll finalize all the meeting locations. And then we'll notify, Marty's going to let everybody know that's on the CAT, where that location will be. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, and we're really looking forward to kicking this off and getting input from the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we ready for this? Okay, so there are a couple ways to approach this tonight. So our subcommittee on the Dorado Hills, Central Dorado Hills specific plan, has been working for a few months on reviewing 3,000 pages of documents and new documents becoming available. It's a tough nut to crack. The easiest way for us to do it was in bits and bytes. We're lucky that John Richard helped us out on the subcommittee, and he had some very focused and public comments that he offered to the Planning Commission, and we had seen it beforehand, and so we've incorporated his reference, his work. And Nancy had provided very focused, much more so than our actual subcommittee report, with some concerns that she had as she explored and evaluated the plan. Park Development came and talked to us 2 months ago in October. Look up ahead for here. Oops, look at that. Basically, I'm sure by now, I'm pretty sure we're tired of talking about it, but this is the specific plan area. There's 2 plan areas surrounding the west side along Dorado Boulevard, which comprises part of the old golf course, past the fire station, and across the road off of Wilson is the technical planning area. So the Planning Commission has already had 2 public hearings, and primarily there's a lot of good public feedback, a lot of good public comments. Those meetings have been in Placerville. They were very lengthy. Thank you, John. The third Planning Commission hearing, and this is an opportunity that we in El Dorado don't have this opportunity. It's very unique. It is on Monday. It is at District Church. It's going to run from 6 to 10 to try to get done before then. But this is a significant thing to happen. The Board of Supervisors agreed that this is a good idea to have it presented here in El Dorado Hills, because it's very difficult for residents to be in Placerville at 8:30 in the morning on a Thursday when people are busy working or taking kids to school, and do both. But this is a unique opportunity. So before we get too far into this, I would encourage everyone, they're doing this as a benefit for the community to allow us to get some public comment in. It's invaluable if you have questions, concerns, comments to make. If you want to learn more about it, show up. And it demonstrates to decision makers that the people in the community are very interested in this, and they want to know how it's being processed and how this is being approved or denied or modified. So I'll go with the speech on that. There will be a 4th hearing, and I think we're talking about January.
Yeah, tentatively we have it on a calendar for January 23rd.
January 23rd. Okay, hold on, I'm ready.
Thursday. That'll be our final hearing.
And that hearing will not be composed with public comment, we think, right?
Well, I'm going to talk to Bree about that Thursday.
The original intent was that it would be sort of the decision-making process.
I know, but we're going to have to see how the special meeting goes on Monday.
I'm sure it'll be special.
Oh, yeah. But, so we might, for anyone, maybe, there may be some stragglers coming in at the last hearing, but I'll be talking to the chairman about that tomorrow to see about maybe opening it up for some last minute comments. So.
And there has been a lot of discussion in the community, social media, which is kind of a fun place to be. A lot of people say, hey, you can still send an email, and you still can send an email, a letter, whatever you need. They want to see all those comments. If you're not available to attend, your concerns are still valuable, and they do look at them all. I talked to John at 10 o'clock last night, if I remember. So they are engaged, and I know that John and Commissioner Williams especially have been very engaged in the process. So after that, there's proposed, I believe, to be 2 Board of Supervisor hearings about the project, and then to be following their determination, the Planning Commission makes.
And one of those is going to be a night meeting as well. The board meeting down here.
Yeah, that was also proposed as well. One of the hearings for the Board of Supervisors will be here in the evening, providing us a similar opportunity to comment. So,
do you foresee yourself, Planning Commissioner Vega, sorry, do you foresee yourself voting on that Thursday meeting after
the last hearing? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we'll do at the end of the hearing, and then we've got to give some direction to staff going forward.
Based on whatever your findings are.
Because regardless of how we decide, we have the development agreement that we can provide recommendations for, because the board may decide something else. So we want to, depending on what they do, we want to provide feedback as to, their decision, what they should consider. Because again, it's a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, and the development agreement, that was something separate that was done by staff. We want to provide some input for the board's consideration when they hear it.
So I have a bunch of our subcommittee findings on here. I prefer not to do that. I'd rather just discuss this and highlight it. The subcommittee findings have been posted on our website on Monday, promoted a little bit through Facebook, through Nextdoor, other places. Our voting members have all had a chance to look at it and review it. So, and again, this is the project just in a snapshot. So, if I just hit the highlights. So our subcommittee had serious issues and concerns about the general plan consistency analysis. In terms of that, a lot of the findings, and the applicant was here, Park and Development, Serrano Associates, and they highlighted that it was consistent on 121 elements of the general plan, goals or policies. As we analyzed it, and keep in mind we're volunteers and we're not professionals, a lot of those findings of consistency look rather subjective to us. We felt that they could be interpreted either being consistent or being inconsistent, and most of them to us seem inconsistent. So there seem to be selectively cite individual portions of specific goals or policies while ignoring other ones or just not mentioning them. So as an example of one that we thought was rather clear, this is the one that's very clear to us. The applicant in the application and in multiple public venues has said this is an infill project, and that's why it's consistent with the infill project. Infill is defined in the general plan. The general plan defines infill as 5 acres or less. This is, and I'll jump ahead, this is 67 times larger than the general plan for an infill project. But that does not mean that this project still cannot be approved. They just, it's not, this isn't a reason to approve it. It's also not a reason to deny it either. So even if you divide these into 2 planning areas, it would still, but the general plan says project sites may not is a legal meaning, may not be more than 5 acres inside. So a simple solution for the applicant is to redefine it as not an infill project. They're not making a consideration. But that was the thing that jumped out at us. And actually, I kept reading infill project, and I thought, I needed to look that up. And John Richard, actually, he got it before anybody else. So thank you, John. These are several.
But just to add on that, in the staff report that in the first planning commission hearing, the planner reported that this project complied with 121 out of 121 provisions of the general plan. And clearly, when the general plan says an infill project is 5 acres or less, it did not. And I think that's what, whenever I read and find out an inconsistency in a statement, and then Kurt quoted that staff report and a number of public hearings that we've had here in the planning commission, and it just makes you wonder what the hell's going on up there. I'll leave it at that.
And that's fair. I will leave it at that. So there are many elements we looked at. There's been a lot of concern about impact, specifically the high school for Oak Ridge, because this would be adjacent to Oak Ridge High School, and everyone knows that Oak Ridge was a school designed for 1,600 students. It's over, I think it's 2,400 right now. 2,400, he's got the exact number. And when projects are proposed, the planning department sends these projects out to public agencies. We get a copy of it for initial sort of concerns or feedback. And we're always disappointed that, especially the school districts, don't seem to have a problem with pretty much any project as long as there's school impact fees involved. And so they say that they can, via either a CFP or Belarus fees, to support the schools. The schools can support the student population as proposed based on the densities that are in the plan. And I know we had said a couple months ago that we would like, if you're concerned, you think that's a little bit odd, and I believe most of us do, to talk to the school board because we elect them. The other side of that too is that the school board gets their information from staff, so it is a cultural thing. Previous boards have always said, hey, we need to find this revenue, we need to support these students. Fair, they say that they can support it. It's kind of hard to believe. And consequently, the other aspect of that is also that the high school district will probably be going with a bond measure in November for hundreds of millions of dollars. So sometimes these things don't, to us as lay people in the community, these things, those issues and concerns don't seem to match. We could take the students, we need a lot more money. So part of this was that, goal 2.4 is that its existing community identity is, it's consistent to maintain that. We looked at it and said, well, that's inconsistent regarding the Measure Advisory vote, where, a significant portion of the public said that they don't support rezoning the golf course. And we talked about, when Ann was talking earlier about community design guidelines and concept amendments for each community, which details specific qualities, features of the community. Well, that hasn't happened yet. So it's hard to say it's consistent with that because it hasn't happened yet. They're making that effort now. But also ignoring that measure you vote, if that's not consistent with that policy to us. And again, the infill, part of the infill project, element 2, which is here at the bottom of the screen, you all stand up. Is approval of project not result in any significant effects related to traffic noise, air quality, or water quality. The draft EIR, the final EIR, there are significant measures that can't be mitigated, and that's how the project is presented. It's okay, we acknowledge that these are significant, can't mitigate them, take care of them. So there are many other ones. It consists of the housing element, the TIM fee mitigation, the TIM fee program that is encourage programs to improve levels of service on existing roadways and allow for focused reductions in the TIM fee program. And right now we have an unbalanced TIM fee program, which is a requirement of the general plan is that it be a balanced program. The open space conservation. Now this project does provide for 50% of the total area plan, or more than 50% being open space. But that objective, they focus really only on one specific element of the policy. I wanted to 7611E, but it ignores a lot of the other goals and objectives listed underneath that policy and that goal. There's just many elements to this that don't be far. So basically what we came down to on this is that we have concerns about the general plan consistency. We're also concerned about the land use. These two planning areas being put together as one project, they're physically disconnected, they're across Hills Boulevard from each other. Really the only strand of connectivity you can find is basically near the fire station. So, and they seem to be, they're not exactly the same geography topology. It's a little different. One of the purposes of the higher density in the specific plan is to provide a walkable community, accessibility to services and shopping, but the Petrol area is about a mile away from any shopping. And they are going to propose bicycle paths, pedestrian walkways, but still, I guess it is walkable, but Petrol seems to be sort of an ignored plan area for this. So our proposal is that these should be two separate projects. And when Bree was here on Monday, she talked about, well, one of the advantages of that is that you can't take a project that's proposed and piecemeal it because it's against the law. So you could take advantage of making projects smaller, moving impacts around. I think it's a good idea to have that cumulative analysis, but these seem to be two disparate projects. So our finding is that they should be two projects. So jumping ahead, part of that land use right now, and I struggle with this because the county website, you used to be able to look at the project status, and you see all approved projects, pending projects. That website doesn't exist anymore, the data's not there. So primarily we have, I'm blanking on the name of it, but basically it's the permitting system where you can go in and look and see attached documents. Half the time there are no attached documents.
Track it.
Thank you. Track it. Can't track it. So when the applicants were here, they and again, the documents, they say that the Petrol area had been approved for 759 dwelling units. I'm sorry, for 624 dwelling units, and I couldn't find that project was actually approved, or those projects were approved. I can't find it in writing anyplace that they were approved, but again, that information is not available on the county website anymore. So, taking out the word, 624 in Pedregal, 135 via Village D, 1 C and D, those lots for Serrano, results in 759 dwelling units. Their project is moving the densities around from Pedregal to west side, and then it results in a similar density at the lower end of the build out at 737 or 1,000 if they incorporate a lot of the senior. They can do a little more density in the project. So again, we felt that these should be two different projects. And the only real advantage that we found, the only real advantage we found in this is that it allows them to move densities around between them and sort of offset and make it more palatable to communities, saying, hey, it's a similar density to what was there before, when you wrap your arms around it and put them all together. So that was our concern. We did have, on the environmental, and a lot of people have been talking about this recently, there's a report from Youngall regarding the NOA, the National Occurring Asbestos Assessment that they did, and it's dated in 2012. At the end of the report, though, it said it shouldn't be relied upon after a period of 3 years without review, or it should be for other projects or areas involved. So that was 2012. This is 2020 now. Wow, that's weird. So we asked, hey, has this been reviewed again? Because it's outside that 3-year period they specified at the end of the report. And I haven't seen that it is. And then in addition to that, in 2015, the California Air Resources Board changed their testing model. That's not a regulatory change, but it's a guideline that they say that they prefer the asbestos testing takes place with these new techniques. And then, so our concern is that, well, if they haven't done this review after 3 years, should it be done? If it needs to be done, are they going to use the new standards, or are they just going to review what they tested in 2012 and say, no, it's still valid? So we think that, obviously it should be current. We're going to jump. I'm just going to go through these fast. I don't remember where I got. These are just here to remind me. Thank you. So the open space, and we keep looking at this, and we're talking about open space, but really the golf course itself was designated recreational open space. It's a little different. We feel that it's an important amenity for the community. It helped define the community for about 50 years that existed. And even the applicant, when they were marketing Strong Dorado in the 90s and the 2000s, they had a marketing video, promotional material that showed that the executive golf course was an amenity, although not part of the project. So we talked about the natural landscape is an element of the general plan, maintaining oak woodlands in B1 and C and D that they're already approved for development. So it's kind of circular logic when we talk about it, because we're talking about eliminating the recreational open space and providing additional open space in different areas that aren't contiguous and that really aren't, there's a question about how usable they are. So as value to the community, we didn't know what it was. And essentially we looked at it, trading the development areas for the 1988 specific plan to the Central Eldorado specific plan. Didn't really provide a public benefit, but it does provide the applicant cost savings from building on the hillside lots from D1, C, and D, and from any potential NOA mitigation or abatement expenses. And there's still some question about whether, what the NOA looks like based off of our concerns from that earlier report. So this was one that we were concerned about because the draft environmental impact report submitted comments saying, well, have you looked at the Measure E? Isn't that a project alternative? It's based off the Measure E vote. And basically they're saying, well, the Measure E vote doesn't meet the project objectives. And that's always a thing. I know that's a secret requirement. You look at the project objectives that you provide legitimate alternatives. But because Measure E doesn't meet the project alternatives, it doesn't mean it meets the community objectives, which is part of the general plan. And additionally, the general plan has its own objectives and goals based off of the land use map that's in existence now and the reason it's zoned the way it is. So we think they're ignoring a potential project alternative by not considering the Measure E alternative of not developing. And again, this is just, the conversation has always been centered around open space, but it's recreational open space. It's a little bit of a different designation. And as we jump through, and because it's a golf course and it wasn't a public open space, it was a private open space, so you basically have to pay a fee to use the golf course. That doesn't mean it has less value to the community. It still has some intrinsic value with the community identification and view sheds and things like that. When we looked at parkland as part of the open space in consideration, we didn't think that there's 2 park spaces provided in the plan. is 15.3 acres along the highway on south of Rayleigh's, and there's 1 acre at the entrance. And we really don't, when we looked at it, we didn't think that 1 acre was like a park, more like landscape, entrance landscaping. So we didn't think that extra 1 acre should be considered as part of it. But when you look at the densities proposed, 11 to 13 acres is required, it would be a requirement that they have to provide park space. Or somewhere, whether it's in the plan or outside the plan, they have to provide 11 to 13. And when we consider things like the park and ride space, whatever that termination needs to be, it's been proposed to be at this community park or the village park, whatever name they're using for it. And also the public overcrossing. Part of that public overcrossing will be in the park space. How much of that space is it? Take several acres? Well, then really all you're getting is what's required of a project. There's no bonus. There's no extra benefit. We can talk a lot about traffic and circulation. Since I'm up here with a microphone, I'll let everybody else have a chance here in a minute. To me, the Park Drive intersection is the most bizarre thing ever. Because essentially it's a parking lot roadway. It's between two shopping centers. It's narrow, rather convoluted alignment. And it feeds across to Saratoga, which itself is kind of an odd alignment now as a result of the improvements that the Eldorado Hills Boulevard interchange to US 50. So right now we know, as just in the community, existing drivers know, drivers are experts, I know, that's, John always reminds me. We're all roadway experts because we're drivers. But right now during the peak AM and PM hours, there is congestion right there at the intersection now, and this project doesn't propose really, if they say that there's no significant impact. So the solution is, and I'll show you a picture in a minute, I don't want to belate this, but this just seems inconceivable when we look at, and I know traffic studies are professionally done and they're analyzed and evaluated, but I think the real world impact to residents, it feels like something else. So, part of the traffic running back report, they talked about cut-through traffic through Rayleigh's parking lot. And the final impact report said that, there's 6 stop signs inside the Rayleigh's parking lot, and drivers won't do it, so there won't be any cut-through traffic. There's 6 stop signs along the front of Rayleigh's. There are 2 along the west side of the parking lot. There's 1 stop sign in the back. This proposed roadway would connect to all of them. So, and our feeling is that, well, even if there's 6 stop signs, if the perception of the public is that it lessens that traffic burden, if they don't feel like it's faster, if they do think it's faster, they'll use it regardless because traffic flows like water. It goes with least resistance. So, well, here's the picture. So, the alignment right now, this is the existing Park Drive you turn in, and there's as soon as you turn in, La Borgata's over here, I think it's Park Avenue here now. But there's a stop sign immediately when you get to the corner here. There's another stop right here. And they're talking about eliminating these 13 parking spaces and moving them in to the center of the La Borgata space. And this is the real, here's a better look at that. So, the proposal to make this intersection better, it's a through and a right on this lane, and there's just a left on this lane. So they're going to take one of the buttons, the figure.
Does Harvard Development own the Rayleigh Shopping Center?
I believe so. Am I wrong? They do. They don't own it?
No, they don't own it. That's these properties.
It's interesting to know what Harvard is. They don't own it.
Did they own it though?
They owned it at one point in time. They sold it.
But the other side was in foreclosure and even Conrad picked it up.
Oh, that's right. It was La Borgata, yeah.
But that's going to be non-compliant for the parking spaces allowed for.
Well, because of the stacking, if there's a line of carpet that they're blocking. So this is someone that baffled me, and since I'm up with the microphone, I'll talk about it, and I'll let everybody else have a chance. Look at the clock. So the new alignment will go behind Rayleigh's and then go through behind and onto the old golf course property and eventually be connected to Country Club. It's the proposal. That's a Country Club extension all the way up through Silver Valley Parkway. When I measured it with the satellite mapping tool, this new alignment is about 28 feet from the roadway to the corner of the building. And so the change up here at the intersection is two straight throughs with a combined right and a left here, and then eliminate one lane in. There's a question to me, you know, so now what's the impact to this separate building, which has its own parking thing? I think one of the discussed topics was connecting this parking lot into this parking lot, but it is on kind of a significant grade. And also, this is a grading curve, you know, I've been shopping at Rayleigh's for 25 years. When I go to Rayleigh's, if I'm not coming from the highway and I'm coming from the north, I stack up in this thing right now at all times of the day, regardless morning peak, afternoon peak. And similarly, I believe my wife's chiropractor is around in Saratoga, there's a cut through. That lane is significant stacking there as well. So I believe the mitigations are paint, striping, and timing changes for the signals. So,
John, can I comment on that?
yeah, go ahead.
Do you mind?
Please, I would prefer you.
Can I use your pointer?
Yeah, it'll let us know. Don't shoot the eye.
So I'm sure most of you read the papers, and I had made a comment about, I raised concerns about the operation of this signalized intersection with this all-way stop intersection. And I requested that the traffic engineer do a simulation. And it's something that's inherent and built into the traffic modeling software, okay? Because you have a signal operating here, you have an all-way stop. And typically in traffic operations, being that close together, they don't work very well, okay, in conjunction, you know. That's why they try to space out intersections with even signalized intersections, but much less, you know, and when they do that, they can coordinate those, but you can't coordinate an all-way stop with a signalized intersection. And so I had asked for a simulation, if you're familiar. Did anyone see when they did the Weber Creek Bridge? The project and so forth? Yeah, he knows because he was there at the board. But it's an electronic simulation which shows cars coming and going from the intersection. And so a picture says 1,000 words. So I've asked the applicant. They didn't warm up to that suggestion. I'll leave it at that. So I may ask again on Monday. So we'll see how that goes. So I met with a representative at DOT, and they had, which I had some serious concerns about this being a perpetual choke point for traffic. And let me just get the rest out, and then I don't know if you have any questions for John or me or comments, but also out of fairness to Parker Development, we also have some other things going on. We have, this Saratoga being opened up to Iron Point.
That was going to be my question. Will your simulation include that? Because that connection is opening within like the next month or two.
Well, I asked for it for the near-term scenario and the cumulative scenario. So it will take into account 10 years and then what is it, 2039?
That is it. Well, that's right.
Whatever the cumulative is,
Yeah.
but beyond that.
35, I think.
So I'd like to see that, how that operates. And then we also have a little project they're considering over off of Silver Valley.
Leeway.
Yeah. And so again, trying to look at this through the lens of looking down the road, literally. What else do we got on the books here? And they do that in their traffic analysis and so forth, but I'd like to see that with the connection over to Silver Valley, which ultimately is going to happen and so forth. So we'll see. We'll see how Monday goes. Like I said, it should be interesting. So I'll have us back. Thank you.
Any other questions for John while he's right there?
I thought the developer was not going to be there on Monday. Was there citizen comment?
No.
Oh no, they'll be there. They'll be there. Staff will be there as well.
It's a full show.
Yeah, it's going to be. It's a regular planning commission meeting.
But the point of the meeting is to provide that opportunity for more residents to participate.
Yep.
And again, I'll remind you, please participate. Whether you love this, don't love this, have questions, would like to see changes, it's important. So, So we had questions about Country Club Drive. This is a CIP project to extend basically from Bass Lake Road all the way down, and it's 4 different CIP projects. This is one specific, this is the tail end. I think Newbury is the first, but, so connecting this to Country Club to Silver Valley, the developer is going to be reimbursed. There's a reimbursement agreement that they'll be paid back for the cost to build this roadway. There's 2 phases of their project. Now, phase 2 isn't part of their project. It's something, it's an extraction the county's asking for. It's a make good, a give. Phase 1 serves their project. It's an entrance to their project. But they're being reimbursed for phase 1 as well. And as we didn't feel that was, are they or they're not?
Well, they are.
Right.
I have an issue
So
with that.
It's proposed that they'll be reimbursed for phase 1 as well. And so our thinking is, well, why are residents paying for the entrance to a private, to a private project development? It does provide the overall connectivity as part of it. So maybe it should be a partial reimbursement, but right now it's a full reimbursement. So the other consideration we have on this is that Country Club is considered a parallel capacity roadway to US 50. And, I don't know what the traffic volumes look like. There's been no study yet. The project was added to CIP in 2005. The golf course closed in 2006. So we're kind of questioning the timing too. Well, wait, how are you going to get the road through there if the golf course was still open in operation? You can take part of the golf course? I don't know. But, so that was concern, a consideration. And if it's a parallel capacity roadway, we talked about, it's too early to talk about design speeds. But we're looking at the end there. To us, it looks like a bottleneck, as John suggested. And it seemed an odd place to put that parallel capacity. When we talk about Country Club Road right now, we're in the Bass Lake Road. It's very close proximity to the interchange. And the reason they're moving it is because it's a horrible situation. It's just too close to Highway 50. So this being moved 1,700 feet to the north. This is about 900 feet away from US 50 interchange Road Boulevard. So that's another question we had. Is it too close? Is it too much traffic dumping out right there? Is the existing roadway? Well, the studies, submitted the traffic impact analysis say it's okay. Level E at the worst, right? That's, level F is the trigger. So, but is it really an adequate parallel capacity roadway? And we said, so that was one of our questions. So it's this ask from the county. First of all, as there hasn't been really any impact study about what Country Club extending it, what's it going to do to Silver Valley Parkway. I know that when EDH 52 was proposed a couple years ago, DOT's, one of their first concerns was, hey, too close to the freeway for having multiple stoplights. I talked to the DOT director today, I was in Pottsville, and they're saying right now that they anticipate, regardless, whatever project goes in, 1 stoplight. And that will help alleviate their concerns about, it's a beautiful new interchange with low volume of traffic and accommodate more. But as soon as you make impacts like that, you start stacking back up to the highway, Caltrans gets a little upset because they own that highway. So we just questioned that. That was the east side. So is it adequate for the purpose? Sorry, and then this is the proposed from 2005. The golf course is close to 2006. So one of the questions we asked, so I can skip a bunch of things, is there an alternative where maybe this road doesn't come into Park Ridge? Could it connect to Dorado Parkway, which has room to expand? It moves the traffic further away from the interchange. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? We don't know. It hasn't been evaluated. So it's just, it's a question. DOT, as I'm looking at this right now, there's been no planning, environmental, or anything, no design through any of these future years, current years. The first amount of money going to any sort of planning to consultants is this year. So how do we know really what the impacts of this are going to be? What if they do the analysis and determine, oh, this isn't going to work, we got to do something else, but now you have a commitment for a development agreement to do something with this applicant. So now they're off the hook, or do their impacts get mitigated? How do they get mitigated? Can you go back and revisit it? We're just watching the show. So, and there's really, right now, the concept is that this is going to advance this project. It'll be done probably, maybe, before these, 28, 29, 37, 38, 10-year gap there. Well, maybe it won't be, maybe it'll be done sooner, based on how fast they develop and the triggers as part of this development agreement. And again, that's just sort of the area they're talking about. And I believe when I talked to Rafael today, they're talking about a coming out roughly where Clarksville Crossing is, the old Silver Valley. We're coming along here through the bottom. So, what are the impacts? We don't know. What does this do now to the school? What does it do to the Entrada Gate, which has no left turn? I know that there's talking about a traffic signal there now too. We don't know. Those things happen, so we don't know what this project does. It just seems that it's a benefit that's a benefit to the county to get the project done. We talk about the pedestrian overcrossing, and it's a nice idea, and connectivity. We really are a walkable community right now. This is the goal of this project, and that's in Folsom. One day on Folsom, that's in the applicant's thing. So our question on the pedestrian overcrossing: has there been a need established that we need a pedestrian overcrossing of the freeway, or it seems to us that it would be more expensive than just building facilities alongside all roads, Boulevard, Latrobe Road. Again, this facility is going to be inside the plan area. Are the residents outside the plan area going to go into the plan area to use it? It seems like it's really just a benefit for the plan area and for those future residents. And these are some pictures. So it would look more like this is Highway 50, is I think Zinfandel. You need this long, because it has to be ADA accessible. So you either build elevators or you have to have a long ramp to accommodate, a lower grade, so it's wheelchair accessible, or when it has a walker, crutches, whatever. So that it'll have to be designed for this function. So that's Zinfandel, that's Zinfandel from the highway, that's Watt Avenue. Hey, my office used to be right over there. The same thing, and you can look and see this actually goes way back here. So our question now too is that since it's designed to be next to the park, or in the park, hey, what's the impact of the park? Is it really 15.3 acres now, or is it 14 acres? Is it 12 acres? And that's an overhead of how they generally look at the lawn they did. So, and that's, I want to say that is Zinfandel. I know it's one, so regardless. So, we'll jump ahead. We talked about RENA needs, and the applicant was very insistent, hey, this helps kind of meet RENA needs, and they define it sort of as the varied housing and not, the types of housing, attached, unattached, higher densities. And those are good things, and those are good things that we need to look at as a county because we're not doing it, and it seems to be a hard nut to crack. But what they haven't talked about is, or they did talk about it a little bit, is RENA is really based on income, and it's income designations, those low and very low, based on certain percentages of income in the area. And both here and at the Planning Commission, they said this project is not going to meet those needs. So to APAC, as we're looking at this one, well then what is the benefit? Can you define that as a benefit of the project? You're calling it a benefit of the project. It meets RENA needs or helps meet RENA needs, but it's not. It's only meeting supposedly the above moderate to maybe moderate, question mark, we don't know. So the community benefit fee in the development agreement, $6,000 per dwelling unit at the time of the building permit being issued. And so, and Kirk said when he was here, that's something I'd never heard of before. But basically, $6,000 to the county, and right now it's undefined. How do you define community? We think it should be Eldorado Hills, and so we're assuming that we should be asking for something that, hey, how do you define community? Because the impact is here. Community benefit fee, it should be here. The majority of it, at any rate. How can we define community? Can we say it's a zip code 95762? Or is that subject to change later? Maybe we need some other mechanism to define Eldorado Hills. Is it the Timothy zone? Timothy zone 8?
Did the county attorney on Monday say he didn't think about the legality of this?
And you know what? You have me on the spot because I was trying to remember that this morning. I didn't have time to go back and watch it or listen to the audio because I was running around. And work gets in the way. I believe because it's part of the development agreement, right? It's an ask from the county, and it's to the applicant. It's not to a resident. You're gonna have to help me, Laura.
That's
pretty accurate.
That was not addressed on Monday. On the Monday Community Council meeting. But yes, as you said, they indicated that because it's part of the development agreement, it can be negotiated between the county and the applicant's partner development in this case, and it's I don't want to use quid pro quo because we don't want to get those words, but it's a give and ask, and they can agree to it even if it might not be otherwise allowed.
But that's the community. So we're concerned that that's just going to go in the general fund and be spent at board discretion. And I think right now we have a representative that would probably fight for that spending to be here. But who knows in 10 years, unless they change current limits. Sorry, John. Who knows how that will be decided later? There might be something where they want to spend it in a different community.
It doesn't say in the developer agreement what a fund is going into, because I don't know.
They say that they had a preference. They had preferred that some of that money go to the Bass Lake Regional Park, be spent in community support, I think recreation and seniors, if I'm remembering.
John, yeah, that was the developer's preference.
Yeah,
that was his aspirational language. The actual agreement says that it's defined as a county-wide benefit.
Yes.
It goes to the county specifically.
So, but we'll take the clock. Trying to get through this. So the thing about that community benefit fee, okay, so you think $6,000 per unit, so it's either 4.5 million at the lower end of the build out or 6 million. But it's over the build out, it's over a 20-year development agreement. So right now it's about $1 million to build traffic signals. And I was just talking today, it's about 2.8 million to build a roundabout on a small road. So how far is that 4.5 million, how big of a bonus is that? And how much impact will it have on our community as a community benefit fee? Over 20 years, it's with permit issuance. So really, you're collecting that over 20 years. Until you accumulate those funds, you really can't do a big project with it. It would be piecemeal type of projects. I don't know.
I'd like to make a comment on that one.
Okay.
We have statistical data that says 85% of the growth that's happened within El Dorado County in the last 5 years has happened in El Dorado Hills.
Yes.
My request to the board is going to be at least 85% of that community benefit number stays within El Dorado Hills, and that's District 1 and District 2.
Okay.
It's not just District 1. But that's going to be my estimate, at least 85%. The board can decide. I can be outvoted. They can decide to divide that equally. Individual team fee zones, or whatever is decided. Right now it's undefined. That's for the board to determine that.
Yeah. And the planning commission can make a recommendation on the development agreement. The planning commission doesn't negotiate the development agreement. So they'll provide their recommendation to the board, then the board will do what the board does. And if you get 90, that'd be great too.
Absolutely.
But in addition, when we talk about those fees, we talk about them being local, our subcommittee's preference is that, so those fees, if they are here, that they be used to bolster spending here and not replace project money here. So if you have a $2 million project, you can't take that $2 million spent someplace else and use these fees for that. We say it's a benefit fee, the benefit should be here, and we don't want, our preference is not to touch existing funding. So the transfer fee was odd. I understand the development agreement. It's an agreement between the applicant and the county. Property transfer fee is going to be paid by a resident, a property owner. So I don't know. I'm unclear on the legality of that. I turned to look at my lawyer friend over here.
So what do you comment on the legality? All of this stuff went through county council's review.
And they said it was okay.
That this is legal. It's been done in other locations. That can all be challenged with a lawsuit, right? But they feel that there are good legal grounds to go this approach, including this. So that's what I've been told from county council.
And to our determination, since that's a transfer fee, that's a function of county government, that really, okay, we could see where that maybe not be spent here. We would prefer it to be spent here. But since it's maybe the transfer fee is supporting the activities to record or whatever justification you can find, but we don't see it as a sufficient benefit to the community to justify a rezone or to a general plan amendment. Look at the clock. The fiscal analysis, it was performed in 2017, 15, earlier. And so it came in
December 2016
okay.
and $2015.
Okay, so we're right there. Kim submitted a letter to the auditor controller, and his apparently he thinks it's there's a good team working on it. He wasn't prepared to weigh in on it right now. We think that the county auditor controller's office should be looking at this. That it's important that the planning staff looks at it. That's an important analysis, but it should be augmented by more fiscally
astute.
Updated. Yeah, and it should be updated. I'm jumping. So the park time we talked about again. We just don't see that 15.3 acres is an active trade for 99 acres of recreational open space, regardless of if it's being used or not being used right now. And that's primarily what it comes down to. We're concerned about the impact of the pedestrian overcrossing on the park space, and we're concerned about requiring that park when it's provided with the CSD or in conjunction with how the CSD wants to provide it or build it, that the parking space is there, that now you're putting another encumbrance on that park, lessening the benefit by requiring that part of the parking right requirement of the project be placed there. Now, that might be a benefit, and the CSD might look at it and go, hey, yeah, we can do this, or it might help us, buses coming through, whatever, but right now, we don't see that that's a benefit to the park. And then the other thing about this is that there's a little bit of uncertainty in it, because if it gets approved for anything less than 700 units, they want to lower the QIMI, they want to meet the lower QIMI requirement. So as a committee, we've been talking about 15.3 acres for years and years. We talked about it here a month ago, 2 months ago. We talked about it at the Planning Commission. But if that changes, that's not what we talked about in terms of what the public acceptance is of this, or the support of the public for this. And ultimately, as a subcommittee, we just evaluated this and say, listen, we're going to lose 99 acres of recreational open space. About half of it should probably still be a park. So 40 acres, if we look based off of what's south of Toronto Parkway, wherever you want to draw a line, we still think that a better balanced approach would be more park space. And that's been asked at the Planning Commission, hey, would you consider talking? And the response was, yeah, anything less than what's on the table now is a deal breaker. And as when we look at this as a project, we're looking for how can this be better? What can we ask for? Can we conditionally support this if something like the 40 acres happens? The response has been that they're not prepared to do that. So it's hard for us to say, okay, well, we'll conditionally support it and then recommend it. They're not entertaining that. So essentially, at the end here, we're not conditionally supporting this.
John,
I know.
Public comment and, vote.
Okay, the trail system, it's nice, whatever. But we've heard from trail users of the existing Serrano trail system, and they say it's primarily people in Serrano that use it, and it's hard to access. There are aspects of this new trail system that are harder, it's more challenging, which might be nice for somebody who likes to use trails, but it precludes the rest of the public from doing it. So we'll jump through all I'm going to get to the bitter end here. Yeah, getting ready. I'm trying to get through it. This is just to remind me, because it's hard to read here. So essentially, one more thing to do. An annual review of the project is proposed in the development agreement. There was an annual review of the El Dorado Hills specific plan in 1988, was part of the development agreement. There were many years where it wasn't done. So, and also, if they want any changes to the project, they desire ministerial change, where they can just go and they're in a development agreement, planning director decides, okay, yes, it meets these conditions. We would prefer to see that decision taken out of one employee's hands. And we would suggest a subcommittee involving different departments. The planning director should be the chair. We prefer the Department of Transportation be involved, the director, chair of the planning commission, or one of their designees on the planning commission, a member of the CAO's office, and a member of the Auditor Controller's office. You have many eyes looking at it. It can still be a ministerial decision, but you're not missing where it touches different aspects of county government. That's the end of the review. And then, so at the end here, measure, we basically said, okay, so this is hard to ignore. I'm not, myself, as the individual speaking now, I'm not a proponent of land use by ballot. This is such a compelling result. We don't think it can be ignored. 91% of voters that voted, 90% of people who did vote, preferred to keep it as open space recreational open space. That's hard to ignore. And the thing we noticed as we were working on this and we were looking at different things, people are talking about it, there have been a lot of social media polls about it. And I only looked at the ones that had 500 to 1,000 people participating. In those polls, it's consistently 89 to 91%. It's a similar result. Here we are 5 years later. So we feel you can't ignore it. So based on all these concerns, the subcommittee doesn't recommend, we recommend not support as it's presented. So, let's see if we want to have some comments. So here's what we're going to say about comments, is that this is what we're going to send in if we vote to approve this, accept this recommendation. If you have concerns that we don't have in here, you need to get those concerns in, because we've spent probably about 3 or 4 months on this. At the hour's getting late, we want to have it in the planning commission by tomorrow. So with that, let's do about 10 minutes for public comments, and then we'll do our officer vote at the end. You're first.
Thank you. I'd like to make a comment. I think all of us realize that this plan will radically change El Dorado Hills. I mean, there's no question about that. And I think a ways back when Tim and John and myself looked at this plan with the developer, we had the feeling that we were looking at it from 20,000 feet in the air, and that we couldn't get any detail. And if you have looked at what our advisory committee has done for APAC, this is the most detailed and professional review of a plan that I have ever seen. And it came out to be 34 pages of detail. And in all those 34 pages, there are many, many things that have to be straightened out, that have to be explained, that if they're not explained and if they're not straightened out, you can't have this plan. You can't have this happen. So that's my comment on the report from our APAC committee, which has been an extraordinary report, one of the most detailed reports. It's not just saying, oh, I don't like it here because I don't like it. This has really been done by people who know and understand planning. And that's all.
And to your point, it could be 100% wrong too. But these are the concerns really that as a subcommittee we're volunteering, these are the concerns we develop.
And I'd like to call out, it is a subcommittee, and I'd like to mention the people who are involved in the subcommittee. John headed it up, and he really took on the yeoman's job of preparing a report. But obviously we can't ignore the significant contributions that John Richards and Nancy Niffen-Jennings made as well. I mean, they each read over 1,500 pages of documents, and I think there's about 3,500 pages in here. Things got divided up. So they really did a lot of work, and the community has to appreciate what they've done. And we hope to reward. I don't know if it's a reward, but we hope to honor John and Nancy with voting APAC membership, which only means that we have to do a lot more work on more projects going forward.
So we're not rewarding them; they're rewarding us. So those are our findings. If anybody wants to provide some comments real quick, let's take about 10 minutes, maybe 15 if we can stretch the room a little. Sorry, Kevin. But if there are more time, we have a microphone right here. If you can come up so we can hear. And like I said, there's things that you think we missed. Tell us we missed it, and that's fair. But you need to get those comments in too, and it can't be just us.
First of all, I want to thank you for the work you've done, because we really see some information there. We've looked at a lot of different things, and there's things you've come up with. We haven't even thought about, infield 5 acres kind of thing, so thank you. One question is, at a planning commission meeting, as I understood it, the traffic people got up and sort of stated the fact that the only effect of this would be at the corner of Saratoga and El Dorado Hills Boulevard, as I understood it. Then there was some discussion about other parts of it. My question is, did you look at anything other than that intersection? Because they were saying there wouldn't be any effect at Wilson, it would be any effect at these different places.
This is the one where it drew our attention. And the thing is, we're relying on what the traffic impact analysis shows. So we thought this was the easiest one to approach in terms of, we don't think that's really consistent with what we're seeing, what residents are asking about. Wilson's a concern for me, but we don't really know what Wilson's going to do, because once it's connected to Saratoga at the other end, that changes that dynamic as well. And also, there are the other improvements are at Town Center, Latrobe, with new lane striping, reconfigure existing roadways, and some single improvements, which are good things to have, but question mark, until you do it, is it going to make a difference? And the major one is north on Silva Valley, which which is odd because it's an existing condition, right? I mean, this contributes, and they'll actually be doing a stoplight and turn lanes at Appian in 2 phases.
Yes.
Yes. So that baffled me. I mean, I understand that there's probably existing conditions there. I'm going to travel when I go visit them.
And actually, the town center improvement's going to be done by the town center apartments.
They're just contributing.
And all they're doing is it's the outbound lanes. If you're coming out into Latrobe Road, they're going to reconfigure the outbound, to provide
two rights.
Yeah, I forget what it's specifically, but a few projects were conditioned to do that. But town center's first in line, so they're going to be doing that when they do the signal at town center and Post Street. So
I just think if you sat down on a workday morning down the boulevard there and pulled every driver, did this project affect traffic at Wilson, all the way up Eldorado Hills Bar, even into Francisco Drive?
Exactly.
You get 100% of them that said it.
Well, the original DIR in 2015, that wasn't an impact at Francisco, but then that was reconfigured. Now they're saying that it's less than significant.
Yeah. One other question. If the position of APAC is adopted, or similar findings adopted by the Commission and the County Board of Supervisors to non-support the project, where does this leave the developer?
They can always change the project and come back. They might get a sense from whatever.
Would they take out an apartment building and come back and say, here it is?
It could be anything.
So,
yeah. So, I mean, and that's their right. They own the property, they have rights to do that. But they could decide, based off the Planning Commission's recommendation, before it gets to the board, they say, hey, you know what? Let's track this a little differently and maybe make an improvement to satisfy these concerns. Or they may just say, we think you're wrong, and just take the chance, right? And even if it is denied at any of those entities, it can still come back as a different project or a modified matter. So that was like we were saying about the infill. It's like that won't make or break a project.
Right.
They can They can come to the microphone.
All right, this brings me back to the discussion I had before. They want to put a stoplight at Apian and Silva Valley, but they're not considering anything on Francisco and Eldorado Hills Boulevard, and you can't tell me there's more traffic going.
It's not a question of life, it's a question of how it's measured.
Well,
I know, you and I, right?
So we'll sit in our cars and go. And I think it has everything to do with the amount, the cost is going to be to realign that per the plan versus just putting a stoplight. So that needs to be considered.
Yeah, I've been in the Bass Lake area. We've been talking about that, about a specific part of the roadway too. And the answer is always, it doesn't meet this criteria, these metrics. So, yeah, I know. But you know what? Please, you should make those comments and contribute them too. I mean, it's legitimate, right? So we would really appreciate you offering.
Hi, Lenny Patani, Crescent Hills, Eldorado Hills. I'm going to speak more on emotions here because this is very frustrating. We've been dealing with Parker Development for 20 years, or for 12 years now, since the golf course closed. And now all of a sudden that he's almost built out now, Bass Lake, all the way to Bridlewood, he wants this additional 100 acres to build more homes. Okay? I'd also like to say right off the bat, I have nothing but respect for our Board of Supervisors. I go to a lot of meetings. I have nothing but respect for our Planning Commission too. The problem I have is the process. Somebody who's working can't go on a Thursday at 8:30 in the morning and wait till 5 o'clock at night before they get to speak on a project. They can't waste the whole day. They have families. They need to make money. I'm retired. I can go to meetings now, but I could never do that when I was working, okay? This is a discretionary project. That means it was never on the books, and all of a sudden Parker Development, who does own the property, said, you know what? I don't need open space anymore. I want to build homes. It's a terrible project. We all know that. But I'd like to talk, and I want to apologize to all the Johns that are here. There's a bunch of them. You've heard my spiel probably 3 or 4 times. You're going to continue to hear it because I'm frustrated and I'm tired of what's going on here in Eldorado Hills. So let's talk about amendments and entitlements. These are our neighborhoods. We are the constituents that voted you into office. Some of us have lived here for decades. We're tired of having to justify ourselves against these outrageous assaults on our neighborhoods. Developers should be held accountable to original planning and zoning and not be allowed to change the rules. After all, isn't the point of zoning to establish order and logic in our communities? Our voter-approved general plan is our land use constitution. Supervisors all took a solemn oath to represent the people who elected them and to serve and protect our interests by following the law of the land, our general plan. No more amendments to the general plan. And in closing, when a project comes before us, we have to ask, is this project an asset or an assault to our community? This project is an assault to our community.
Absolutely.
No more changing of amendments.
State law allows 4 changes to the general plan on an annual basis. If you look at the history of Dorado County, we've had anywhere from 4 general plan amendments to 1 general plan amendment per year. And that's allowed because of minor changes to make adjustments. When you do a major update of the general plan, that has to go back typically to the voters. So minor changes are always allowed. Recognize that's part of state law. And El Dorado County historically has exercised that. Long before I got on the board of supervisors. So
is this a minor or a major change?
this is a major, in my opinion.
Okay.
My opinion, but I'm not legal counsel.
3 questions because of APAC's in-depth knowledge of the proposal. 1, are there any riparian issues associated with any of the development? Because there's a stream behind Raiders that runs and is a continuation of the stream that is culverted under Serrano Parkway. And I have no, that's a question, is there one? And secondly, the fire department and EID and, well, schools are silent, have signed off. Does their review get any in-depth analysis incidental to what the planning commission does, or do we just accept the fact that they say we can handle it? Those are my 3 questions.
I believe that they accept the fact, they turn to those agencies and they ask, and primarily the fire department, I believe it's the fiscal impact of the fire department, can the fees that are involved cover the cost so it doesn't degrade fire service, and it covers the cost to the fire service. The same with CSC to a degree. EID is primarily looking at water hookups and those fees. I said that out loud.
I know what they're looking at. Do they provide the substantive background information or report?
EID does on the water supply just because they have some legal requirements to meet that. But in terms of the impact to natural water, naturally occurring, streams, seeps, springs, EID doesn't really, I think, weigh in.
Well, I think that's a separate.
EID just got additional allocations of fossil water, which has been worked for a long time. They're talking about selling excess water because they've gotten more water allocations than they're using. Given the constraints the state has put on outdoor irrigation and everything, and law, they have sufficient water. So you can go down that path, but I don't think anybody who understands how state law is set up would determine that there isn't adequate supplies of water for the EID for this service or other services.
See, my point isn't so much is there or isn't there. Do we have access to the details of their analysis so we can look at it and see if it is a quality analysis or it's one that meets their objectives and goals of achievement? And that would apply to both the fire department and EID. And if the schools ever said anything, that would be the same question as to whether those who are going to be impacted can see what their rationale and logic was. If that's a closed envelope and they always say, we said yes, then I think you're kind of going on their word.
I'll answer the waterways issue you raised. Back when we first looked at this project, 2015-16, I wrote a letter to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers asking if they had received an application from the developer, and because there's, I think, 2.5 acres or roughly of ponds and waterways and stuff like that, they basically responded they had not at that point in time. I believe because this is a and John, Planning Commissioner John, you'll correct me, this is a large lot tentative map application. The approval, the development agreement and the document says that they will be applying to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers after the fact to get the various approvals they need once it's already been, or if it is approved or suggested for approval by the Planning Commission and or how it's dealt with the Board of Supervisors. So the answer is no, nothing has been done yet. And yes, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers absolutely has to sign off on that.
I'd like to add that EID has put into this plan saying they have sufficient water based upon the amount of water that is now used in Serrano, that they have sufficient water to accommodate these buildings. Not taking into account that you're going to have multi-story, multi-family buildings, which you do not have in Serrano. So, where are you with that? So,
one of my neighbors said that they were, the idea was asking for property to add another tank above me.
I didn't look at the documents, but it's conceivable that they are. They might be asking for in Serrano as well. I mean, not part of this plan area, but it's possible. Okay, I'm looking at it real quick, and then we're gonna get to the.
Just real quick, at one of our meetings, somebody brought up that there was a Native American burial ground on the Ridgeview side. Has that been looked into?
Here's the thing about the cultural resources is that they can't be identified in the documents because they need to protect them and they don't want people going out there and treasure hunting. So I struggle with the cultural resource. I know that I believe I've heard from many people that are writing stones. I haven't heard that anybody confirm what you're saying about. So,
I didn't know. That was the first I heard. I didn't know if it was
okay. You've been waiting so patiently.
I hope I can weigh in on a bunch of these issues that people have just brought up. Number one, let's start with cultural resources. I did the study for the previous developer many years ago. There are significant sites on the Pedregal side. Let's just leave it at significant sites. One of them has apartments planned on top of it. It also leads into the fact that there are running springs. That's the reason there was settled people there in historic and prehistoric peoples. And the springs issue has never been addressed in any of the stuff that's going on. There's running springs. Even before it started raining, the springs were running on that property. Water issues are a huge issue that has not been talked about at all. People that live around the Pedregal project, I talked to somebody else today, everybody has water problems. They have, underneath their house, they have springs and seeps that come up. They're building on a place that shouldn't be built on anymore. Already the houses that are there, everybody I talk to, there's streets that have running water every month of the year because the springs and seeps. It destroys the gutters, it destroys the sidewalks, it destroys driveways because people are built on top of them. That's something that's not mentioned in anything I can find.
Well, we included that. We're concerned about it, but yeah. There's no detail. That's why we're concerned.
In fact, there was so much water coming off the hillside that used to be the whole boulevard and below the archery range and onto their new apartments used to be a reservoir called Mormon Reservoir.
Thank you. I couldn't find that document.
Yeah, and I have maps showing it, the existence of it. The rock walls that run through the archery range were to keep the cattle from fouling that reservoir that's there. So there's a whole lot of things that never got discussed in the documents from the developer. Let's see. Biology, their last studies appear to be, from my reading of it, from 2012, where they talk about things. There's no frog habitat. There's none of this. All these wetlands-related issues that a lot of agencies are interested in. Those are 7-year-old studies done during the drought. Does that really tell us there's no frogs there, or do we believe when it was dry and somebody went out there for a few minutes that that's adequate? let's see, I mean, I have lists of stuff and I don't have a lot of time to get into it. But one of my main points is that if somebody took what was proposed on the El Dorado Hills specific plan, which became Serrano, and looked at all the promises they made, and I have maps because I worked on that project too many, many years ago. I have maps of what was supposed to be built there. And none of that ever happened the way it was supposed to. So you're looking at this project and, oh yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do this. What assurance do we have? Why don't we ask Parker Development to give us the original plans and what happened in between, and things like checking on the cultural resources that were supposed to be saved on Serrano. I know one that got saved. I don't know. But there's a whole lot of difference between what's happened and what could happen here would be exactly the same thing. They're not going to pay. They're all promises now. None of it ever happens. So I've got major concerns with this, and I appreciate the work you put into it, and I appreciate that you listened to people and looked at it and are not, going for this project.
And so I think we would ask, are you going to provide those comments?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
Wayne.
Wayne Howe, been here forever. Thank you guys. Your 37 pages will be incorporated in my comments that I submitted to the EIR from our attorney. And all this lovely discussion we had tonight, you've made all those discussions moot by the one thing, or the things that you found, that this project is inconsistent with the general plan. And we have sufficient facts to deny that, to give John the due process that this project is not consistent, it can be mitigated, deny it. And with that said, good job, guys, and we'll see you on the 13th, and I will also have my comments. And John will take his due process.
Thank you.
Hey, Kevin. This is your podium, please. I'm here.
No.
We appreciate it.
Anyhow, you've done tremendous work in seeing your write-up here, and your findings of consistency or inconsistencies is truly amazing. I was doing the same thing on New Year's Day. However, the submittal that will come from the CSD is going to be more in the context and scope of the CSD's purview. It's going to speak to what we've been talking about as open space, aesthetics, kind of more focused in what the CSD's purview is. However, in my own review, I found a number of consistencies that are the same as what you found, maybe a few others, and I'd offer those to you personally from me, possibly tomorrow, if there's time for you to even consider those.
There's some typos we need to edit.
Yeah.
But we're trying to get this in for John's crew to review.
Right.
We want to provide adequate time for them to see.
Absolutely.
But if we have them, we'll reference them at least.
And I like some of the references used up there to almost look like some of my own sentences and letters I've written. So I really we think on the same wavelength.
The only great people we plagiarized were John and Nancy.
It looked really good. Thank you.
Thank you. So, with that, look at the time. Would anyone like to make a motion about accepting?
So moved.
Joel makes a motion to accept the subcommittee.
I'll make a motion to accept the conclusions of the committee.
So it's 2. Okay, voting members. Elson's here, right? Elson's way over there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so 6. So the motion is to accept the subcommittee findings and recommendation submitted to the planning commission. Ayes?
Aye.
Okay, aye. Awesome. Well, that was unanimous.
John?
Yes.
I'm abstaining.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't count that. Okay.
If you don't know me, I'm on the fire board. As part of the discussion with the development agreement, there's a possibility that that 11.5-acre commercial civic site in Dorado Hills Boulevard, rather than going to the county or the CSD, may go to the fire board. I find that that is a conflict of interest because I am a fire board member, and I take, as a retired attorney, I take conflicts of interest very seriously, so I am abstaining from this APAC vote for that reason.
And that's fair. We appreciate that you're very transparent for that. So, with that, that motion passes. It's 5-0. We'll be submitting these comments with some typo corrections. It's late, so the last thing on our agenda tonight, if I can get through, is that last month
Wait a minute, are you denying the project?
We don't get to deny or approve. Our recommendation is not support of this project.
Shouldn't you get a vote with the 7 members that are here?
We just did.
We just
did. That was, we accepted the subcommittee recommendation. That's
I just think it would be clearer if you made a motion that you deny this project so there's no confusion at all.
Yeah, we don't deny projects. We either support, conditionally support, or non-support.
Okay.
So our vote.
Can you vote on a non-support?
We just did.
We're voting not support.
And that's
historical.
That's what we're going to send to the planning commission and the board of supervisors that we don't. The voting members of APAC did not support the project. So the last thing.
John, first can we, I'd like to nominate
okay, here we go.
Nancy Vivian Jennings and John Richards to become the APAC voting members based on their significant contributions to the subcommittee report.
Second. Okay. So with that, all you can vote on this. All members in favor? Aye. Unanimous. You're the mafia. So now you can vote on this. This is our roster from 2019. We're continuing forward in 2020. I'm hoping somebody else will step up in 2021. So I'll make a motion. But do it individually, or do we do it as a slate?
Slate.
So I make a motion that we approve the slate of officers for 2020.
I second that.
Okay, voting?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Everyone go home.
Thank you.
We'll see everyone on Monday.